Chapter 2. Which Way? Daddy had always been rather unlucky with cars. One had been sat on by an elephant, and another had been sat in by Jeremy James, who had accidentally steered it into a wall. But the present car went really well. Once it had got some petrol in it, and soon they were driving merrily along past fields and hills and forests. One hill had the figure of a huge white horse cut in it, which Daddy said was at least 200 years old. "That's even older than you, Daddy," said Jeremy James. "Who drew the horse?" "Nobody knows," said Daddy. "It's a mystery." Some time later, they passed a field containing a circle of big stones, some of which were balanced on top of others. "That's called Stonehenge," said Daddy. And it's about 4,000 years old, which is even older than Mummy. "Who put the stones there?" asked Jeremy James. "Nobody knows," said Daddy. "It's a mystery." "Well, why did they put them there?" "Well, that's another mystery." "How did they put them there?" "That's a mystery too." There seemed to be a lot of mysteries on the way to London. But wherever Daddy went, there seemed to be mysteries, like car keys in the medicine cupboard. Jeremy James suddenly felt sleepy, and the next thing he knew, there were no more green fields or hills or forests, white horses or blocks of stone. Instead, he and Daddy were in a long grey street with a line of cars ahead of them and a line of cars behind them, and none of the cars were moving. "Have they all run out of petrol, Daddy?" he asked. "No," said Daddy, "they've run out of room. This is London." "But if London's bigger than the High Street," said Jeremy James, "there should be lots of room." "Well, there is," said Daddy, "but none of it is where the cars are." The cars all moved forward a few feet and then stopped again. The car next to Daddy was being driven by a bristly man who suddenly got out, waved his fist, and shouted some words which sounded rather interesting. "What was he saying, Daddy?" asked Jeremy James. "Oh, something like, 'Oh, dearie me, I fear I shall be late,'" said Daddy. "He didn't say that," said Jeremy James. "Well, he might have put a few warples," said Daddy. The traffic did eventually get moving, but it wasn't very long before Daddy no longer knew where they were moving to. Somehow the streets of London seemed to have shifted from where they had been on the street map. What should have been a left turn must have been a right turn, or what should have been a right turn must have been a left turn, or maybe they shouldn't have turned at all, and oh dear, it's a one-way street. As Daddy lefted, righted, scratched his head and warbled, Jeremy James saw something he'd already seen before, which was a little surprising since this was his first trip to London. "I know that sweet shop," he cried. "I expect you do," said Daddy. "We passed it 5 minutes ago." At last they turned into a street that was full of houses without any shops, and there Daddy spotted a lady in a uniform. He pulled up beside her. "Excuse me," said Daddy. "Can't stop here," said the lady. "I know," said Daddy, "but I'm looking for Welbeck Street." "You're in it," said the lady, "but you can't stop. You're on a double yellow line." "Well, can you tell me where the nearest car park is?" asked Daddy. "I can," said the lady, "but you won't be able to park there." "Why not?" asked Daddy. "It's full," said the lady. "Well, where can I park then?" asked Daddy. "Follow any signs that say car park," said the lady, "and hope for the best." Off they drove again. Jeremy James thought they'd be lucky to find the street, and Daddy said they'd be even luckier to find a car park. They did some more lefting and righting through streets where there were no parking, past parks with space and no cars, past car parks with cars and no space. "Why don't we drive home?" suggested Jeremy James, "and then walk to London?" Daddy said that was a good idea, except having found his way into London, he wasn't sure he could find his way out again. Finally, they came to a flashing sign, and Daddy let out a cry of triumph as they drove down the dark, twisting tunnel, past rows and rows of parked cars, and eventually into a space that was just right for Daddy's car. Now I know, said Daddy, how Columbus felt when he discovered America. They left the car in its special space, left their cases in the car, and walked out into the grey daylight. Jeremy James noticed that the street was full of paper bags, bent tin cans, newspapers and cigarette packets. Are we near the rubbish dump? He asked. No, said Daddy, we're in it. They now had to find Welbeck Street again. Daddy took out his street map, turned it upside down, looked left, looked right, and looked lost. Can I help ya? Said a shabby little man with a stubbly chin. I'm looking for Welbeck Street, said Daddy. Then I can't help ya, said the shabby little man, and walked on. A dark-skinned man in blue overalls was painting on a window ledge, and Daddy asked him if he knew the way to Welbeck Street. Oh, dearie, said the man, I am not coming from this part of London, so sorry. Then Daddy tried to ask a lady, but she flapped her hand and said, No, thank you, and walked straight past him. Another lady stopped, smiled sweetly and said, No speak da English. An elderly gentleman hadn't heard of Welbeck Street, and another elderly gentleman had heard of it, but didn't know where it was. An elderly lady knew where it was, but didn't know how to get there. By the time a kindly policeman had showed them the way to Welbeck Street, Mrs. Robinson, the important lady, had gone to another appointment, but she had left a message. She would meet Daddy and Jeremy James for lunch the next day, if they were still going to be in London. Judging by today's experiences, said Daddy, we'll be lucky if we ever get out of London. He wrote a note for Mrs. Robinson to say he was sorry about today, but was looking forward to tomorrow. And then he said something that brought a smile to Jeremy James's face. Lunch? Said Daddy. Yes, please, said Jeremy James. I'd like bacon and eggs and sausages and roux mushes. Roux mushes? Asked Daddy. Like we had for breakfast. Ah, mushrooms, said Daddy. Or did you eat them upside down? They left Mrs. Robinson's building and walked to a street that was full of restaurants, but none of them were serving bacon and eggs. Wouldn't you like a pizza? Asked Daddy. Or kebab? Or fried rice? Or a nice hot curry? Jeremy James knew what he wanted, and he also knew what he didn't want. He wanted bacon and eggs, and he didn't want anything he didn't know. Finding a bacon and egg restaurant was as difficult as finding a parking space, and so Jeremy James finally agreed to a restaurant with the next best choice: fish and chips, sausage and chips, or chicken and chips. Jeremy James chose chicken and chips, and he had a Coca-Cola with it, and strawberry ice cream after it. That was truly a lunch fit for a Londoner, though it was a pity about the roux mushes.